welcome to another edition of Dr. Bickmore's Why Wednesday in Conversation. And today, my guest is Bill Konigsberg. And I don't know if Bill remembers the first time we met, but people may not know this about you, but you're really a pretty shy kind of a guy, right? And
I have
and
that side to me. Yeah.
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 And at one Allen, I think I'd been going 4 or 5 years, and I came out of the main ballroom, and you were sitting by yourself with your back against the wall. And I can't remember if it was shortly before you had to go on or shortly after. And I knew Jim Blasingame, and I knew a couple other people that knew you, so I introduced myself, said hi, and we chatted for just a few minutes. And one of the things that I like about you, Bill, is when you're talking with somebody, you seem to be always present. You didn't know me from Adam, right? And here I am introducing myself, and you looked at me, and we chatted for a couple of minutes, and I thought, well, he's as genuine as his books are, and I think you'd had 2 or 3 books out at the time, and then I've been kind of following along since then. So good. So how are you doing? I'm sure people that follow you want to know if you're okay, if you're recovering well.
Yeah, I've had a year. Thank you. And I remember meeting you too, and I appreciate your kind words. It was nice meeting you. I was listening because I was interested. But I've had a tough year. I had to have spine surgery. I had to have surgery on my neck and have 4 discs removed, and it came out of nowhere. And it's been a year. I'm doing really well. I feel good. I'm getting the range of motion back in my neck as well as I will, and my arm is beginning to work. The reason I had to do it is my arm stopped. My left arm, which is the arm I use, stopped working. So it's almost back.
That's good. And that's got to be tough. I'm really interested in the retrospective of who Bill is and where you come from. And I think it's been enough time now that people forget that you kind of broke into writing as a sports writer. And I think most people would assume if you're a sports writer, you probably played a few sports in school, along the way. So give us the rundown of kind of who you were in high school and moving into that world.
Well, I was a sports kid from early on, and I mean, if I had my choice, I would have been playing wiffle ball with my friends or then stick ball with my friends 24/7. I loved playing, especially baseball type sports and football type sports. I was too skinny to play football, but I played baseball in elementary, junior, and high school. I was a pitcher, and wouldn't have I would have wanted nothing more than to be a Major League Baseball player had I, let's say, 30% more talent. I just wasn't good enough. I was a dominant pitcher through about 10th grade, and then when everyone started to throw harder, I didn't. So I topped out around 68 miles per hour. It's not fast enough.
Yeah. Yeah, well, but it took you a ways, and you kept interested in that. So did you go to college and follow sports and try to do sports and write about it in college, or how did you get interested in that business?
Well, I did in my second college, which was I first went to Oberlin for just 1 year,
Hmm.
and then I transferred to Columbia, and I wrote for the Columbia Spectator. I did write some sports, and I loved it. And really, this was just a merging of the two things I liked the most.
Yeah.
I was a baseball head, a baseball stat freak, a football stat freak, and there was a time before my memory went kaput when you could have asked me the batting average of any player in 1982, and I could have told you. Not
Wow.
anymore. So yeah, I loved it, and I just wanted a job where I could write. And they told me right away in college, a teacher said, you can't make money as a fiction writer, and I believed them. And I
Hmm.
don't blame them for saying it. They're not that person wasn't wrong. It's very, very hard. But I'm glad that I took the chance after my 20s, which and early 30s, which were about sports writing.
Yeah, that's great. And you say statistics. I think you even have on your webpage or somewhere along the on or one of the web pages about you that you kind of even wrote a column about fantasy baseball and did stuff like that. So you
Oh
kind of
yeah.
are a statistic nerd and follow all
Ab-
that along, right?
Absolutely. I could tell you how many fantasy football teams I have, but you would laugh at me.
I well, the question my brother won't forgive me if I don't ask. Do you follow the Phillies? So
I am following with interest right now because they're having their possible last game today. I can't believe they're doing it again. I mean, I was at the game where the Phillies lost to the Diamondbacks last year
yeah.
and were eliminated, and they just have to figure out a way. They're too talented to
Yeah,
disappear so
that's my
quickly.
brother's started following him several years ago and tries not to miss a game on TV, but it's like they get right there and they can't kind of push through, right? So
Yeah,
it's gonna be
unreal. I don't think it's over. I think
yeah.
we'll have to see. And of course, by the time this comes out, people will say, "Oh, we already
Hey,
know the
what are
answer
we
to that."
talking about, right? So along the way, you're writing and you're doing um, sports articles. When do you try to make that transition to because now you're pretty much a full-time writer. You write, but people don't do that transition easily. And over this last year, I think I've interviewed about 30 writers, and some of them are still doing their day job, and some were teachers, and some were editors. So when did you make that shift, and how did you do that?
Well, I decided in my early 30s that if I was ever going to write fiction, I was at the time working at ESPN
Yeah.
on the ESPN.com side. Uh, I decided if I was ever going to write fiction, I was going to have to do something. And I was not the kind of person who was going to have the pluck to wake up 5 hours early and write and then do my job. It wasn't going to happen. So I chose to get an MFA in fiction.
Yeah.
And one of the real, I felt like one of the reasons to do that was that it would afford me the time not only to learn, but to write. And I learned a ton, but it also gave me an opportunity. I wrote my first published novel in my MFA program. And when I actually, after my MFA, I went right back to sports writing. I went to work at the Associated Press in New York. But at that time I was already shopping that novel and you know it
Yeah.
was purchased. So
And that was out of the pocket, right?
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, out of the
Yeah.
pocket, which is a football book. And was there expectation for you to produce kind of another sports book, or you say, no, I'm going to write what I want? How did that go?
I did write a second sports book that was a football book that was initially purchased by Penguin, but through an editor change, the editor who inherited it didn't like it. And that's what made me write Openly Straight. And I would say, in terms of the interior of what was going on, I was aware that I could write the baseball book, the football book, the basketball book. I had more I wanted to say, and so there are sports in several of my novels after that. But I wanted to branch out and say more that I needed to say.
Yeah, I think that's where I found you somewhere between the two. Now that you're saying that, because I remember reading Openly Straight when it was when it first came out. But in my generation, I was high school teacher for 25 years and went to higher ed, and I did my PhD from 2002 to 2005. So when I was worried about boys reading books, I was reading Crutcher and several of those other things, and it was John Ritter, for example, others that I think really write some quality stuff. But you can be stuck in something where you're going to write something that for lack of a better word, rings true in terms of characters and isn't just a sports book, right?
Right.
So when you wrote Openly Straight, I thought, okay, here's the courageousness of writing something that isn't just okay, I'm going to write my football book, and then I'll write a basketball book, and then I'll write one for middle grades, and I'll write, and there's a place for that, right?
Hmm. Oh,
But if
oh,
you have,
absolutely.
but if you have more to say, um, you should say it. And this
Well,
is the
yeah.
other thing is people know you for, we can say honestly, Ben, right? But you are trying to be in the world of young adult literature a pretty straight shooter about who you are, who you want to be, and how you want to be treated in the world. And I
Yes.
think your books reflect that, right? So,
Yeah, yeah, I
um,
think so. I mean, David Levithan once introduced me and said that I saved Scholastic a lot of time because he could just use my titles as some of the key phrases. You know, there's openly, honestly, truth and the porcupine of truth. Yeah, I mean, that's in a nutshell, that's who I am.
yes, and it's it's for those of us that attend Allen all the time. Um, none of us will forget when you came and took the occasion to kind of change your speech and um, address an issue that needed to be spoken about directly, even when people. I think sometimes people get confused. Sometimes people want to be honest, but they want to cover, or they want to protect, or they want to misstate. And I
Mm.
think you took the chance to just say, wait a minute, this is how I see the issue.
Yeah,
This is how the issue feels to me, and
yeah,
this is how I want to speak to it, right? And I think we now have an award that's in your name through the Allen Association and others, and I think that takes a lot of courage to kind of let the chips fall where they may. I'm thinking back now specifically about the music of what happens.
hmm.
Um, I and like I'm trying to say every time I think about one of your books, no, that book's honest and straightforward. That book's honest and straightforward. But I think the music of what happens, where two characters are trying to find closeness with each other, but the message of the past experience that blocks those things becomes a real honest
Yeah,
portrayal of people trying to work through difficult things in their past, while connecting, knowing that that connection may bump up against
right.
the things in the past. And you do that really well, right? So if
Thank you.
if I'm gonna if I'm gonna and I'd probably start with openly straight if I were giving books to kids, but people that are um, looking for an LGBTQ book that have some sophisticated reading and haven't read a lot of YA, I think the music of what happens is a really good
Yeah.
book to point them to.
I
Right?
think that people say that my books, if they just pick them up out of nowhere, they find them surprisingly deep. And that I don't know what I'm doing. I mean, I'm just doing what I do, but
Yeah.
I mean, I like books that are quick reads.
Yeah.
That's what I enjoy. I am not somebody who's going to spend 2 pages describing the sunset. I
Yeah.
don't like reading that either. I like one page. One page is enough. So I mean, this is just who I am, and it translates into books, and I love that. I mean, I never, I don't think I would be capable of writing something that was sort of lowest common denominator. It's just not how my brain works. And
Yeah.
frankly, I was taught when I was very, very young, and I believed this message that I was supposed to always tell people what was going on with
Yeah.
me. And it might be weird for some other people, but what I do when I get up and I give a speech, uh, that's just authentic Bill. That's just
Yeah.
me getting up and saying, this is what's up.
Yeah. Well, and that was certainly uh, a really great moment, and I think a difficult moment for many people to hear, and probably difficult for you to give in some ways, right? To get
Yeah.
up there and do that. So that's great. Your writing process, what is it like for you? I mean, you took that bold step to go get an MFA and you started writing. So what's the routine like? I mean, given that you've not just had surgery or pickleball meets aren't in the way, what's your writing schedule look like?
I do best to write in the morning. That's when the creative juices are strongest. So I try to get up and get going really before my brain can tell me to stop. That's how I am. So I used to say more frequently that I start writing before I brush my teeth. I have to get out of bed and I have to go to the computer because it's like standing at the edge of a pool. And the longer you stand there,
Uh,
the scarier it gets. Uh, I will also say that I am a binge writer. I will do the work. Um, so when things are not flowing for me, I will do what I like to call outside writing, which means I will write from the character's point of view. I'll just play. I'll play in the
yep.
sandbox, things that aren't expected to make the book, and some of that winds up making it. Most of it doesn't. Uh, but when I get in the zone and know what needs to be on the page, there is very much nothing that can stop me. I just get frenetic, I get manic, and I write very, very fast. It just takes a while to come.
Yeah. So are you, if it's not coming, do you condition yourself to do 2 hours no matter what? Do you do 4 hours no matter what? Or
I would say
what's the
when I'm at my
span?
most disciplined, I will sit there until the timer goes off, and it will sometimes be 2 hours. You know, on certain days, it'll just be one. It'll
Yeah.
just get whatever you can. I think that as a writer, because everything is always germinating,
Yeah.
I can be writing when it doesn't look like I'm writing. I might be weeding the yard. I might
Yeah.
be going to have lunch. My brain is on it, and so I know that also sounds a little bit like an excuse, but it's my process. Uh, at a certain point, you have to just accept who you are, and that I there are times I don't look diligent, but I think in the end I'm pretty diligent.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of us that are, academics who have to write or die, right? There's a lot of times that I'll be sitting in a meeting, but
All
that
right.
paper that I'm working on is percolating in the back of my head, or I'm thinking, I need to rewrite that section or do that, so I'm sure that's what you're talking about,
Yes,
or else the
exactly.
fact that you're working in a garden or something lets you amazingly sometimes have space for the character to flesh itself out and or a plot line to reveal, and then you
Yes.
hurry have to hurry back and do it. So
Right.
how long, and I know this maybe varies from book to book, from beginning of idea to germination to the final product, how long is that on an average for you?
I can't believe that after all these years I can't answer that question, but I just can't. I mean, everyone is different. I will say this. Every single book is a painful birth. I don't know why that's the case. I keep thinking I have to come up with a shortcut or a new idea that's going to make it easier. It's never easy. I
Yeah.
don't know if other writers feel the same way, but none of this is easy. Uh, the adult novel that I've just written has had the longest period of time between the original idea and where I am now. It might be 4 or 5 years. It's been
Yeah,
a long time. But I would say the average book about a year and a half.
to do that.
Yeah.
And how are you a member of a writing group? Do you share it along the way? Do you wait till you have a draft? Do you have trusted others that look at things along the way, or where do you
I
sit with
do.
that kind of practice?
I have trusted others, but I tend not to. What I mostly do is I annoy my husband. If I think I've written something smart or funny, I'll bother him at work and say, "Hey, listen to this," and he humors me. But um, I am very careful about not getting things out there before they are ready, because what often will happen in my zealousness and excitedness, I'll share something and then the feedback will be rough in a way that sets me back. I've learned over time as the writer that I am today that it's a private endeavor that takes place between my ears for a long time before beta readers come into play.
So that indicates to me that you probably have a draft, you draft it again, you draft it again. you know,
Yeah.
and then you feel ready to give it to an agent or somebody after you've been through it, certainly more than
Yes.
once, maybe sometimes two or three times.
Yeah, I think at this point, things tend to work that way. What's funny is that my agent is reading my adult novel right now. It's really the fourth draft of this thing. It's the
Yeah.
first draft this agent is reading, and I'm waiting on it. Uh, this one, for as much as I like this, there is only one person who has read it other than me, and that is pretty surprising because I used to do a
Oh,
little bit more sharing than that.
uh,
I just don't feel the need. I think maybe I'm just a little more confident now, and I just kind of know it's what I want it to be. So,
yeah, it's that's interesting. And I'm finding if I find I'm interviewing authors that are past their third book,
mm.
they often say that, well, I used to, but but I think they find a rhythm or a space in which they know they may not like telling themselves, oh, this needs another go through by me, but they know that they have to say that to themselves and do
Yes.
another go through, right?
And I'm going to tell you how I know that I need to do another go through. And it's very, very simple. If my mind wanders while I'm reading a page of my own, it's a bad sign. Every single time something has happened to my mind while reading that is relates to either the words or the story. Something isn't right. So I usually stop there and take a look and say, what's wrong here?
Now, that's really a helpful insight, right? If I can imagine telling my students some version of that. If you don't like reading what you're doing or it's not holding your attention, you know, what makes you think I'm interested, right?
Right.
But I would, when I think about your books, I think of really strong characters.
Hmm.
So does the character come first or does the situation and problem come before?
Both. I think early on the character came first. And as I've gone on, I've had more of a sense of what I wanted to write. The most recent one, Destination Unknown, which is my book set in 1987 in New
Yeah,
York,
yeah.
I knew the story. I didn't know who I wanted to have tell it. And that was a very new thing. And that is the thing for me with my writing is that there's always an added degree of difficulty with every book. And I don't do it purposefully, but I think it's sort of the way that my brain works, where my brain says, "Oh, we've done that.
Yeah, yeah,
Let's try this."
yeah, that's good. And one of my colleagues, one of the new graduates from um, ASU, she's out and she just posted a raving review of Destination Unknown. Rebecca did.
Oh,
She said, and I thought, ah, and then I felt bad because I knew this was coming up, and that's the one I haven't read yet, although
ah.
I've tracked it, and I certainly remember that era and the startling way in which um, we were not prepared or we were unwilling to deal with an issue that was clearly an issue, right?
It's the
And
most the and we're talking about the AIDS epidemic
yeah,
and the
the AIDS
beginning of it.
epidemic. Yeah,
It is the most. I can't imagine that anything will ever for me surpass the the complications of that issue.
yeah,
And what it's done in my life and what I've seen it done to other lives, that people were flat out dying,
yeah,
and society, for all sorts of reasons, mostly didn't care. Um, and
yeah.
it happened. It's not that it hasn't happened in other places. I mean, things are happening in Gaza right now where you think,
Yes,
oh
yeah,
my God, this thing is happening, and why am I going about my day and not doing something? I
yeah.
guess, yeah.
It's really it's troubling to me in some ways in which we seem to make hesitant steps forward, right, in awareness, and then we fall backwards. And one of the
Yeah.
things that my wife and I talk about a lot is the current political state of
Hmm.
things feels like we're falling backwards so fast. It's just I I can't. I want to say to people, do you not remember 10 years ago? Do you not remember 20 years ago? Do you really want people treated like this or the other thing? I hear what you're saying about that is,
It's
and
beyond.
yeah, it's really kind of disturbing to me.
It's disturbing. So here's the complication to it. It's disturbing beyond words in some ways, what's going on. And then the thing that makes it complicated is that you have to look at your own part in it. And to the degree that I am vilifying people who are me. They may not be as educated as me, or as kind or whatever, but we're all people, and we're all capable of the same kind of BS.
Yes, I think we're remarkably capable of kindness um and blindness at the same
Yeah.
time, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And
That's
I
right.
have to keep saying to myself, well, am I doing good in the world, right? Am I am I willing to uh, live in a very conservative neighborhood and say the things that I think are important rather than not say the things that are important, right? So we have
That's
to,
a challenge, isn't it?
yeah, it can be challenging, but we've been pretty successful. And when I taught school, we lived in Salt Lake City, and you know, often for streets, we were the only ones that had a Democratic street sign, in our in our yard or in the window. And
Yeah.
um, but I think you have to stand up for principles as you understand them. And like we were talking to somebody, and they will agree with the negative, or with the what I consider negative conservative rhetoric, but then anybody they know is an exception to the rule. Oh, well, like
Absolutely.
the
Yeah.
Hispanic, well, that person, yeah, they're good. They're a good egg. I think. Well, which
I got to
which
tell you a
one
quick, I have to
is?
tell you a quick story about this. I had a neighbor in Chandler, Arizona, who I wound up being quite friendly with. Super MAGA,
Yeah,
unbelievably MAGA. And he later told me that when he heard two men were coming to live next door to him, he thought we were coming for his children.
yeah,
Uh, and that was a shocking thing to hear. But he then told me, now I've gotten to know you and I really understand that you're a great person and you're great people. And I said, because he'd given me so much sort of anti-Muslim rhetoric, I said,
right.
so is it possible that you would feel the same about Muslim people if you actually met a Muslim person? And he said, no, that's not possible.
Yeah,
So,
that's not possible.
yeah,
Uh, eh, well, it's very it's very disturbing for me, and and that sidetracks us. But
yeah,
again, when
sorry.
you're writing about, but it doesn't, because when you're writing about characters who interact with your characters that are gay, you have to imagine all the possible realms of acceptance and rejections, and the things they see along the way. When you're How hard is it for you to imagine, let's take of the music of what happens again. How hard is it for you to imagine the parents and the related relatives of people and see them as kind, to see them as embracing the issue? How hard is that dynamic for you to write about and imagine? Or is it easy?
Um, there are so many ways I could answer that question. But the thing I feel compelled to say is that the hard thing about writing is allowing everybody a heart and a soul. And that's a challenge because there are people out there who do terrible things, who believe things that I find to be repugnant, and I don't always succeed. I have several two-dimensional characters in my books, if I look back. Uh, but one that I'm really proud of, by the way, I got dinged on in a review. My New
Oh,
York Times review of The Bridge was very upset about the treatment of the bully to my female character. There's this uh,
yeah,
girl who bullies, uh, I'm losing names. This is my brain
yeah,
right now. Anyway, Uh, and I gave her, I went into every brain. It's sort of in that book, it's third person and it's interior for every character. And
Yeah,
I found that that was so much stronger when I made her a real person and I explained who she was and why she did the things she did. And they didn't like that. And I was sad to hear that. I think that that's so important for us to come to understand. I always say me too, and not me
yeah,
too for the, Me Too movement, which that's
yeah,
another story, but just me too, I'm flawed. I mean, me too, I am a round, complicated person. And when I separate myself from other people, um, in my writing, it's a bad thing, and in life, it's a bad thing.
yeah. Let's talk about the bridge because I think structurally the bridge is dynamite. The bridge is really structurally for somebody who likes reads a lot of fiction and you know it's really good, Bill. But it deals with um, the issue of depression and suicide ideation in some ways. And I know that you've been really honest when you're on Facebook and other places of saying, "Hey, depression lives here." I'm doing that, um, and frankly, I've found my mental health more difficult retired than it was when I was busy working, right?
Interesting. Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's one of the reasons why I'm still dabbling with the blog and going to NCTE in a month and going to the Allen workshop again, is because I find that I'm healthier if I'm engaged with other things. So I would say you in your other books, characters are struggling with their emotions or whether they're accepted, but not in the same direct way that you deal with in the bridge. So is that an issue where the problem is foremost and center in your mind, and then you created a plot around it? So tell us a little bit about the origin of the
Yeah.
bridge, and you can fill in as much as you want for people, because again, I kept waiting for that book to really be on some big award lists, but I think maybe it scared some readers, right?
I,
And
I
so
think it also came out during the pandemic. It was
yes,
bad
yeah,
timing. Nobody during the pandemic wanted to read about depression, apparently. I
yeah,
also thought, oh, I don't want to say masterpiece, this is my best work. Um, let's see where it goes. And it's done nicely, but it never quite got the traction that I hoped it would. Um, that was such a difficult book to write because I was drowning in it. I really didn't know the full story, who the characters were, who I was jumping around to, why. It was one of those books that I'm sure I wrote 2,000 pages to get that book done.
uh,
Must have, because I tried it in so many different ways. And I think the way that it ended up with that sort of third person jumping around limited um, really works. And I think that the way it works is that if it works for people, it's because those people feel very real. And so a lot of that job was character work, which
yeah,
character work as a writer is the same as character work as an actor. You have to sit in the chair of that character and you have to know their story. If you don't know the character's story and who they are inside, you can fake it, but you're really not going to write something that is three-dimensional. You just can't. You won't know I don't know how to say it. You won't know the nouns. You won't know the deals. You don't know the things that they've been through.
yeah. It's we're working. Some colleagues and I met a guy who in Las Vegas who was a 20-year um, police veteran, retired, and he started a acting troupe with teenagers called the Toe Tag Monologues.
Oh, I've seen that. Sure. I was
Yeah,
at
yeah,
the Vegas. Yeah.
and we're trying to get a book out in which we take a monologue and then associate it with 10 or 15 young adult novels about that issue. You
Sure.
know, and we're using a couple of your books and several things, right?
Yeah.
But we're right to where we need to send it to the publisher, so that Byron and the Toe Tags group can take it to schools with them, so that there's a resource that teachers have, that kids can read the books about this. They can write their own monologues, about whatever issue
What a
they
great
happen to
idea.
be have, and they can do that. So he needs something when he goes. Well, he called me last week, and I thought he was calling me because the book's not to the publisher yet. And I
Mhm.
thought, oh, he's going to be on me. Well, he in Vegas, he was driving down the road, and he saw a guy on a bridge over the overpass, and he goes, "That's unusual. I'm going to turn around and go talk to him." So he turned around, and by the time he got there, the guy had climbed over the railing and was getting ready to jump
Oh,
onto the freeway. And Byron had stopped and said, "Hey, bro, what are you doing?" you
yeah.
know, and talked him off 2 hours.
Oh, wow.
I talked to him, and he said, I didn't know why I turned around, and he said, shortly after I got there, a police officer came, right, and talked to them, and these two guys. Well, he's getting the biggest civil servant award Nevada Highway Patrol gives.
Oh,
And
that's
and
amazing.
and the cop's getting one too. And he said the cop remarkably let him take the lead. He said he
Wow.
didn't know I was a retired police officer, didn't know anything, but he knew that he could see as he approached that
He had
they
the
were talking.
situation.
They
Yeah.
were talking, and and so it's a remark. So when we talk about things that are fanciful or fiction, they
Hmm.
happen around us all the time,
Right.
right? But
Yeah.
are you willing to kind of take the time to find out what your for lack of a better word, your brother is going through or your sister is going through, and can you help carry that weight until
Yeah.
they can carry it on their own again, right? So
Right.
I think that's a great story. So Byron was telling me, he says, "I need the book." he said the the head of the Highway Patrol in Nevada called me, and he said, "How can we help doing what you're doing?" And he said, "How about $1 million to tour all the schools in Nevada?" And the guy said, "We'll work on that."
We'll
So
work on that.
they
Oh,
might
that's
be able to
fantastic.
do that, because he said they had something like $30 million in opioid money that they don't know how to spend well. And he said,
Mhm.
"Well," he says,
Here's a way to do it. I
"yeah,
mean,
here's a way to do it, and this can
wow.
get into schools and be helpful." So now I got to get with Shelley and Gretchen, and we got to make sure the book is finally edited and get it
Yeah.
so it can go.
Well,
Well,
that's exciting work, and I'm so glad he's doing that. I'm so glad you're doing that. It makes a huge difference. A huge
well,
difference.
and you spent quite a bit of your time. You spent
Yeah.
a good amount of time um, helping and
Yeah.
lecturing. Didn't you spend a year going around?
Several months I
Yeah,
think it was several months in 2015, talking to young people about suicide and depression.
yeah,
Uh, and that was before the bridge. It was just something I
yeah,
felt compelled to do. I have found that, first of all, and this may be changing, but adults were very protective of not wanting kids to be talking about that. And I was vehement in my uh, expression to them that, in fact, it's exactly what we have to do. And it's not talking about it like, oh, I wish I could die. It's
yeah,
I feel this way. What can I do,
yeah,
to feel better? And it's not me as a therapist, it's me as a listener.
yeah.
And somebody just saying, that sounds really hard. That in and of itself is a gift for a kid to hear that what they're going through is challenging and that there's a way to walk through it.
Well, and I think, I for me, and I hope this resonates for you, but I think a lot of your books are lifeline. People who aren't experiencing those issues can get a level of empathy and
Mm,
understanding about characters, because
yes,
that's always been the case for me. As a very young kid, reading was a vicarious experience into the lives of others, right? So
absolutely.
um I can remember when I was the only Mormon kid and Michael Rain was the only Jewish kid in my class. Well, we both found a bond because we were both not there, right?
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
can remember we lived by each other for 9 months. We moved. He moved. His dad was a dentist in the military, and trying to recover my relationship with Michael Rain has been a lifelong journey of reading books about Jewish kids and Jewish writers, right? Because I thought,
sure.
oh, I
Uh,
wonder what, because as 11-year-olds, Michael and I had really deep philosophical religious conversations. At least we thought they
Absolutely.
were, right?
Yeah,
And it's been a lifelong goal to read from Barry's Goodman, It's Like This Cat, to, Saul Bellows, Humboldt's Gift. They're all a journey into understanding somebody who's not me, right?
right.
And
Absolutely.
try to come around to a better grasp of that. Do you have any secret revision processes? You've got that third edited version. You don't quite want to send it out. So, how do you read it trying to tweak it? What's that like?
I tend to actively read slash edit. I think there are other writers who will read their work trying not to edit, just trying to read the whole thing. I can't do that. So when I see something is going on, I'm learning as somebody who is a little bit maybe affected by ADD. It's hard for me to read every line. I've always been somebody who has to really focus to do that, but that's what I do with my own work. It has to be
Yeah,
word by word. And sometimes I just have to tell myself to slow down. Uh,
yeah,
a couple things I'll say as a writer, editor person that might be useful to people. First is I never, ever, ever, ever throw anything out. If I have a page that's going away, I will put it in a document in the folder on the computer for that book called Notes.
okay.
Because what if I'm 5 months down the road and I remember that thing I wrote about the spider?
Yeah,
Well, it's gone. I cannot bear to have stuff disappear.
yeah,
So I keep everything. Um, and that's proven useful quite often, where it's like, well, I didn't need that here, but I need it now.
yeah,
Um, and I have so many documents going all the time in my book folder. I would imagine in the last book that I've written that there might be 250 documents in there. I mean, it's just because
yeah,
I'll pull up a new one and I'll call it "What if uh, John does this?" and I'll
yeah.
start writing. It's all play. It's all
Yeah,
play.
yeah. Until you find the right thing. Yeah, yeah, that's really fascinating. Kimberly Willis Holt told me once that she tries, if she's stuck somewhere, she'll try to write a scene from the point of view of everybody in the scene, even
Yeah,
if they're
that's
not
great.
doing it, right? So she'll say, okay, what does the boy on the bike who's passing by see this is happening? And she says, I'll even write it from the point of view of the dog that's tagging along with the kid. And she said, in the whole scene, there may be one line about the dog, but maybe I get that line right because I've written the whole thing from the point of view of the dog, right?
Right. That
And
is so good.
yeah,
That's
she
so
keeps
good.
all of that stuff,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's really a kind of important work for that.
I think it is important work, and it's the work of a writer to understand the world fully. And I would add to that, uh, I think I might have just said it's like a game. I
Yeah,
think of these as like I invite myself to cr- create new games. And
yeah,
so if I am doing something and I'm stuck, I might just start thinking, well, what could I do that would be fun with this, that would be new, that might
yeah,
glean some new information. So it's always about being creative and flexible.
yeah. It's like trying to tell Tony Gwynn that, watching watching film of somebody pitching him 4 games ago, isn't useful, right? Well, of course it's useful, right?
Right.
You become the hitter you are because you've studied every pitcher. And what does this pitcher do when the count's 3-2? And, what does he do over time? And that's
That's
going to
right.
prepare me. So I think then you're prepared if you keep all those drafts or those games or those experiments, then you're ready to put wholes together. I'll bet it's been more than once that you've been editing something and go, you know what? I think I treated this slightly differently once before. Let me see if I can find that. And then you have a
Yes.
new tweak, right? Mhm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And uh, God, we're both a little bit older. Let's just say
Yeah.
that. Uh, my memory has taken a hit recently, and I have to be very careful when I'm writing now about, oh, have I already written that? That's a new thing that's going on for me that's unpleasant.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Was it something in a draft that I wrote, or did it get published? These are important questions.
Well, what's on the horizon for you coming up? Have you got any other plans? Are you going to try to go full adult novelist? You're going to stay in the young adult world? What's
So
up?
I have a couple things happening. One is that Openly Straight is in Hollywood as it has been for over 10 years. And that, you know, keeps popping its head up in very
Oh,
interesting ways. And in the most recent iteration, it is to turn what was a screenplay already into a feature, a series. I
a
mean,
limited
into a
series.
series.
Yeah.
And in this one, I've been working with CJ Cox, who wrote the screenplay. He's also known for writing Sweet Home Alabama and Latter Days, the movie.
Hmm.
And so CJ and I are now going to be co-writing that, and we've just decided to start co-writing something else. So
Oh,
I have a sort of a foot in Hollywood in a way I never have before. And the adult writing is definitely where my head is in fiction. I think I feel very at peace with the idea that I've said what I needed to say to young people, and that now there are more vital voices who
yeah.
are coming forward. And I'm so glad that people are still reading my books, but I'm 53. I mean,
Yeah.
what could I possibly have to say to somebody who is 16 about their experience? That's
Yeah.
a little unfair, but it's how it.
Yeah, I think you probably still have things you could add, but it's tricky. It's one of the reasons that it was slightly easy for me to retire from the classroom at the university. I thought, I taught 25 years, which gave me a lot of experience. But when I'd been doing university work for 15 years, I thought, I'm almost 2 decades from the classroom now, and it's not the same classroom. And
It's
then when
not the same
COVID hit,
classroom.
it's really not the same classroom. And I thought, I just don't know that I can help you write a lesson plan. I can help you organize units, but I'm not sure that I'm giving you the best advice on what's current in the classroom anymore, right? Of how to do that, because it's kind of now a different world than it was when I started and when I ended
1,000%.
and when I was visiting classrooms. So I feel good about that. And I can still talk with authors. I can still read the current young adult stuff and have some sway as a critic with those kinds of things. But again, I think you reach a point where you're trying to explore the new doors, the new avenues, right? And
Right.
if you do that, I think that's great. Well, I hope that means that will you won't quit coming to Allen from time to time or do a retrospective or find that what we need to
Well,
do is when it's close to you, when it's close to Phoenix, we need to write you into a proposal and say, come on, Bill, come on over and help us out.
I loved going to NCT and Allen so much, and I fully related to what you said about it being harder on mental health when we're not as connected with all that.
Yeah,
It was a beautiful part of my life. I loved those people.
yeah.
So I'd love to go
Well,
back.
yeah, well, if it gets close again on the West Coast, I'll think, okay, let's write something where we can recruit Bill to come and do that.
Please
Maybe,
do. I would be
maybe
happy
we'll
to
do a
go.
toe tag thing and have you be part of it as well. That would
Yeah,
be that
great.
would be phenomenal. Well, it's been great talking with you. I hope things work out well for you. And the next time we're in Phoenix, we'll call Jim and you and say, hey, let's
Yeah,
barbecue at Jim's house. I think you'd
I
like
love
to do
that.
that.
Good. It's so
Oh,
nice to see you again. Nice to connect again.
thanks, Bill. Appreciate it.
All right.